The former vice president out campaigning in Iowa. And, what we learn about Mike Pence is that it's a mystery how he got this far in politics, how he got to vice president. He went from the House, became governor, and then, of course, to being vice president. He was asked in front of an audience about the disproportionate rate of taxes, let's say, that billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos pay, while ordinary people are, quote, stuck footing the bill. Here is what the former vice president had to say.
I'm somebody that I don't really buy into the rich need to pay their fair share.
I don't really buy into the rich need to pay their fair share. It's the only sound we have right now. Let's listen to one more thing and then we can have at this guy. Mike Pence said, and this is him talking, there's no question that the tax code today creates a lot of different carve-outs for people who can shelter funds, keep dollars away. I'm somebody that I don't really buy into, and we heard that the rich need to pay their fair share. When you look at the statistics of where we actually get our funding from the government, the top 10% of earners in this country pay about 90% of the money that goes into the federal treasury. Let's go just one more here. Pence likes to talk to that and mislead people with those talking points. A study by the Center-Right Tax Foundation think tank indicated in 2018 that the richest 1% paid more than 40% of total federal income taxes. That's according to the Tax Foundation. So what you're looking at there and what you're listening to is a man trying to be president who is so disconnected with running for the presidency that he thinks he's okay with rich people paying less in taxes proportionally and certainly in amounts. And I don't remember more of a tone-deaf political speech in Iowa where you're not speaking to Wall Street than what Mike Pence just did there.
Yeah, so we're going to get to some of the stats that show how disastrously wrong he is in a second. But yes, we have some of the lowest marginal tax rates in the world. And he says it's too much, it's too much. And then this is a common sleight of hand that the right wing uses, right? Did you know that the richest, and they'll fill in the blank 1%, 10%, et cetera, pay a giant percentage of the taxes? Yeah, brother, I know that if someone has $1 billion, they're going to pay a lot more in taxes than someone making $25,000. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? Right? And that's why we say fair share. We're not saying, okay, give me 100% of what you made. We're not saying, it's Jesus Christ. I mean, we're down to, like I said, some of the lowest rates in the world. The corporate tax rate is preposterous. It's down to 21%. By the time they put in all the loopholes, the Irish sandwich and the double Dutch and all the different crazy things that they do in Cayman Islands and et cetera, they're down to effective tax rates that are nearly nothing. And often Amazon that makes trillions will pay nothing in taxes. Effective tax rate for some of the wealthiest people in this country are now sometimes down to 3%, right? And Mike Pence goes, nope, too much, too much. The poor rich. I mean, come on. But they've lost touch with the reality because all they do is serve their donors. So what Mike Pence is doing there is an ad to the donors saying, please send me more money, please clap.
First of all, I think that Michael's exactly right that the fact that Mike Pence has ever held elected office in this country is something he should consider a minor miracle, because that man has no political instincts whatsoever. And to go and campaign in Iowa and quite explicitly say, I think the rich are paying too much, and that, try to break the narrative that they're not paying enough, which is, I think very true, especially considering coming off the heels of watching here in Illinois, how to successfully actually do this messaging. And I'm referring to the fair tax amendment ballot measure that we had in 2020, where we had the opportunity to have a progressive income tax in Illinois opposed to our current flat tax system, and to see the massive amounts of money in advertising being spent in the actual way to frame this argument and to frame this issue to get people to vote against their own interests. Because you can't just go out there and say, I actually don't think the rich are paying too much, because the average person isn't going to be susceptible to that line of messaging. So I think, Cenk, you're spot on in saying that that's just explicitly a message for his donors, although I can't imagine why anyone would donate to him. You're not going to get any kickbacks. This man's not going to even make it to Iowa, probably. But the actual, messaging and campaigns that happen, it's just massive amounts of disinformation and misinformation, and telling you that you're not going to be able to keep your lights on because your taxes are going to be so high. And that's how in Illinois we still have this regressive flat tax system, despite the fact that more people would have been paying less in taxes if we had actually passed that initiative. So he's, and just not even capable of doing this messaging, right?
And let's not speed past the fact that the most Christian candidate is espousing what is almost the least Christian position on something like this, and he's selling himself as the pure religious man going into Iowa, which is a pretty evangelical state, especially for the Midwest, and selling that and that it is a position that really does not mesh with what we think of as real Christian. Let's go back to some of these numbers, though, and why not only is it not Christian, not only is it not politically savvy, it's also wrong. Data from a few years ago showed us that the 1% is taking in exponentially more money than those in lower income tiers. In 2019, the richest 1% of Americans will collect more than $1 in every $5 of income in the United States and will pay a slightly higher share of the nation's overall federal, state, and local taxes, 24.1%. Meanwhile, the poorest fifth of Americans will receive only a small fraction of the nation's income, 2.8%, and as a result will pay a small fraction of the total federal, state, and local taxes. Also, those calculations don't take other types of taxes into account because lower income earners are impacted disproportionately by regressive taxes, such as what Ravana was talking about as payroll taxes and sales taxes. So you're running into that. When we look at effective rates, the wealthiest among us are the best at skirting taxes as well. They have the facility, they're able to pay for the best people. The 25 richest Americans paid an effective federal income tax rate of 3.4% between 2014 and 2018. And some of the country's wealthiest billionaires paid no federal income taxes in some years. ProPublica reported this in 2021. And finally, over time, our tax system has become more and more favorable to the ultra rich. Surprise, surprise. The US tax system has grown less progressive over the last few decades with tax legislation such as the 2017 tax cuts, which I'll point out many people in the Republican Party want to make permanent, and Jobs Act enacting large cuts for the rich and corporations. The average top marginal tax rate for the rich stood at 81% between 1944 to 1981, compared with just 37% for the highest earners today. So you look at these numbers and you see that these talking points that they espouse about how it really isn't true that they pay the lion's share of our taxes. Well, that's not really true.
Guys, 3.4%. And Pence says it's too much. It's too much. And all of you know this in your bones, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, left, right, it doesn't matter. You know the rich use their accountants to try to avoid taxes as much as humanly possible. Nowadays, MAGA even brags about it, even though they're not rich necessarily at all, right? Because they're a huge percentage of the voting base, and so they're probably mostly just like us economically, right? But they go, yes, I want the rich to pay less than 3.4%. Really? So look, this is why Pence is a bad politician, as Ravana and Michael have been saying, because Trump at least knows to pretend that he's for the average guy. That's why he goes into the McDonald's and says, hey, I'm buying everybody Big Macs, right? He goes into another restaurant and says, everything's on me, then runs out and doesn't pay the bill. Okay, he literally did that. Anyways, but he knows to pretend to be a populist. Whereas, I mean, here, I'm going to read a comment from one of our members.
We can't just punish his honesty, I guess, right? I mean, like he is so stupidly honest in this case.
Yeah, Throat Goat Dragon in our member section said, Mike Pence is a scarecrow stuffed with donor money that an RNC staffer found in an Indiana cornfield. And that's about right. So, and look, yesterday we were giving Mike Pence credit for standing up to Trump on January 6th. And explaining what the Constitution actually says to a Republican voter. And today, we're giving him discredit. And so most people then ask, because they're used to American media, so wait, do you guys like Pence or don't like Pence? Which side are you biased on? No, we're not. No, we're telling you things that are true. When Mike Pence says January 6th was a disaster and totally unconstitutional ask of Donald Trump, that is correct. When he says the rich are paying too much, the poor rich, we need to cut them another break, that is not true. So you need to use your judgment to figure out when they're saying things that are true and not true, and not just go, okay, I'm 100% against or 100% for.
You know, these tax cuts that Pence alluded to in 2017, the Trump tax cuts, Pence wants to make these permanent. So many Republicans, as I mentioned, want to make this permanent. They expire in 2025. 2025 is the second year or the first year of the next administration. So if you're not happy about this stuff, these people are out there saying, no, we want our money. We want our money. And that's an important, I don't think it's possible to overstate how important that is as a part of the next campaign.
I was just going to say that Donald Trump is really, really lucky that all of these bozos and idiots are the ones running against him in this primary, because we're not even that close to Iowa and he's already solidified the Republican nomination.